wrong one. Okay, so that took a bit longer than I wanted it to. Just getting ready for stuff. I'm to understand this is at least in part an autism thing. Like, when you have a schedule, it's good and it works and great. But as soon as you get kicked off that schedule, it's bad times for everyone. It doesn't look like anyone's here right now, so this is for future viewers. You get to see me put on my hand thing. I've been away for a while. I apologize for that. My life was majorly disrupted in several ways. And it continues to be majorly disrupted in several ways, but I decided that I wanted to do this. And it's a hell of a thing. It's a hell of a thing because, like, it's weird how life throws curveballs at you. I had an entire plan for how to do all of this, right? I had an entire plan for how all of this was going to go, how I was going to stream every day of the week. I don't think I can do that. The first time City Council went to like 9:30, and I had to scramble here and do a bunch of reading, and it wasn't enough. I decided I wasn't going to be able to stream on Tuesdays. And then the first time my DSA meetings, the DSA meetings I go to, I'm an officer in my local DSA. For anyone, I am still the tech coordinator. I am at present the tech coordinator of the Land of Lincoln DSA. So, for anyone viewing this in the future, which is where you would be viewing it, I'm going to share this in some places real quick. Normally I would do this before I start streaming, but I didn't have as much time as I wanted. A couple things happened as I was setting up, and I didn't have as much time as I wanted. Nah, that would be scummy. I'm not going to share that there. Nah, I'm not going to stream it there. That would also be scummy. Need to put some machine oil in my chair. exit out of that for now. You know what? That'll have to do it. Let's get started in earnest. All right. So, friends, enemies, assorted potted plants. My name is Ron, and there's a lot of news out there. In a very real way, there is too much news. You have major news outlets like NBC, ABC, CNN, Fox, NPR, and even ECT. You have online news organizations like the Young Turks, Vox, and PolitiFact. You have straightforward misinformation peddlers like the Daily Wire, Breitbart, and CBN. That's the Christian Broadcasting Network. And that's to say nothing of podcasts or YouTube videos or late-night talk show hosts or various comedy sketches. It's a lot. In a very real way, it's too much. I'm not going to tell you that I've gone through all of it. Today, actually, I haven't had as much time as I would like to go through most of it. But I've gone through some of it. Some of it isn't worth going through, but I will tell you that I've gone through some of the usual suspects and found a handful of interesting stories I thought I would share with you. I will also briefly remind that if no one's watching this, If no one's watching this, then the Ko-Fi pitch is superfluous, so... In hour one of the program, we will be going over news that broke over... if... Is anyone watching this? That isn't the button I meant to press. I'll do that in the second hour then. Alright, let's go over some news stories. No, that's not it. That shouldn't be it. There we go. All right. A federal judge says that results of North Carolina court race with Democrat ahead must be certified. Disputed ballots in the still unresolved 2024 race for a North Carolina Supreme Court seat must remain in the final count, a federal judge ruled late Monday, a decision that, if upheld, will result in an electoral victory for the Democratic incumbent Allison Riggs. And that's basically the story in a nutshell. Myers, that's the judge who is presiding over the case, Myers wrote that votes couldn't be removed 6 months after Election Day without damaging due process and equal protection rights of the affected residents. Myers also ordered the State Board of Elections to certify results that, after 2 recounts, showed Riggs to be the winner, by just 734 votes, over Republican challenger Jefferson Griffin. But the judge delayed his decision for 7 days in case Griffin wants to appeal the ruling to the Fourth Circuit of Appeals. There's more. Let me take this and put it in chat. I keep forgetting to do that. North Carolina court race story. All right. So this is ultimately a minor thing. And one judge isn't going to necessarily change the tide of fascism. But it is a victory. And I think that we should celebrate victories however we come about them. There is more to this story. You can see that yourself here. But I would, if anyone, I suppose, after the fact is interested in reading this, the link's in the comments. You can read it yourself. Speaking of victories, a Palestinian student at Columbia is freed after his arrest at citizenship interview. In Burlington, Vermont, a judge on Wednesday released a Palestinian student at Columbia University who led protests against Israel's war in Gaza and was arrested by immigration officials during an interview about finalizing his U.S. citizenship. Immigration authorities have arrested... Let me real quick, paste this. This is from the AP, obviously. A judge on Wednesday released a Palestinian student at Columbia University who led protests against Israel's war in Gaza and was arrested by immigration officials during an interview about finalizing his U.S. citizenship. Immigration authorities have arrested and detained college students from around the country since the first days of the Trump administration, many of whom participated in campus protests over the Israel-Hamas war. It's not a war, which has killed more than 52,000 Palestinians. Mohsen Madawi is among the first of those students to win his freedom after challenging an arrest. He walked out of a Vermont courthouse Wednesday and led hundreds of supporters in chants including "No Fear" and "Free Palestine." He said people must come together to defend both democracy and humanity. We've seen a number of immigrants arrested for supporting Palestine. I think last month when I was trying to stream regularly, we were going over these once a day. The Trump administration is very serious about that. It's serious about doing it because they're fascist goons. Even if he were a firebrand, his conduct is protected by the First Amendment, the judge wrote, adding that offending Is that where I wanted to, Fourth paragraph. No, here's where I wanted to start that. Madawi, I think that's how you pronounce his name, Madawi, 34, has been a legal permanent resident for 10 years. He was in a Vermont state prison since April 14th. In his release order, the U.S. District Judge Jeffrey Crawford said Madawi has raised a substantial claim that the government arrested him to stifle free speech, with which it disagrees. The judge said even if he were a firebrand, his conduct is protected by the First Amendment. And he added that offending political opponents or alarming the State Department doesn't make him dangerous enough to try to justify detention. The U.S. government argued that they can remove Madawi from the country under the Immigration and Nationality Act. That's because Secretary of State Marco Rubio says that his presence and activities would have serious adverse foreign policy consequences and would compromise a compelling U.S. foreign policy interest. There's a thing I noticed when I read that. That's straightforward fascist rhetoric. What Rubio is saying is that Madawi's words and actions are powerful enough that they can change the tide of international diplomacy, but that he's also weak enough that merely imprisoning him would stop that from happening. In other words, or to phrase this in a more obvious way, they are saying that he is both too powerful to defeat and too weak to be defeated. Too powerful to be defeated by the state and too weak to defeat the state at the same time. That's straightforward fascist rhetoric. I phrase it like that because it's one of the 14. It's one of the 14 characteristics. I forget which one. I want to say 9. It's a 9. That in and of itself is not important, but it's fascist rhetoric. They're engaging in fascist rhetoric, and it's good to point that out. A government attorney said Wednesday that Mahdawi is a national security threat, pointing to a 2015 FBI investigation into allegations that he made threatening comments about Jews at a gun shop. But the judge said the FBI appears to have determined that those accusations were fabricated. It's not funny. It's not funny. It's not funny. That's horrifying. They made something up to try to get him deported. But it's funny that the judge came right out and said, yeah, no, somebody made that up. And you know somebody made that up. Very rarely do you get language that strong in something like this. There is a bit more to the story, mostly going over background information and like next steps and things. I would encourage, if you want to read that part of the article, you read it yourself. The link should be in the description. And let me check on chat real quick. Nope, still nobody. Well, that's everything I prepared ahead of time. Oh wait, no, there's one more. And this one is actually bad news. High Court reinstates enforcement of Ohio's ban on gender-affirming care for minors during appeal. This is again from the AP. Let me put a link to it in the description again. This is again from the Associated Press. Ohio may enforce its ban on gender-affirming care for minors while an appeal proceeds, a divided Ohio Supreme Court ruled on Tuesday. The law also bans transgender women and girls from participating in female sports, but not trans male. The High Court's 4-3 decision reverses a lower court ruling from March that had blocked the 2023 law from taking effect. The order marked a victory for Republican Ohio Attorney General David Yost, who has characterized the legal dispute as a fight to protect those unprotected children. Yost has parted ways on the issue with the governor, fellow Republican Mike DeWine, who vetoed what was labeled the SAFE Act in December 2023 in a move he called thoughtful, limited, and pro-life. The GOP supermajority legislator quickly overrode the action. So that's interesting. This is still bad news, but that's interesting specifically because it indicates that even Republicans are trying to push back on it, and they're not able to. This is something that is so pervasive in legislative circles. This is a thing that is being pushed so strongly in legislative circles that no one is able to effectively push back against it. And that is weird. The litigation was filed in March 2024 by the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU of Ohio, and the global law firm Goodwin, who argued that the law not only denies health care to transgender children and teens, but it specifically discriminates against them but it specifically discriminates against them accessing it by allowing the use of identical medications for other purposes. They lost at the trial court level, but later succeeded in getting the law temporarily blocked by a panel of the 10th Court District of Appeals, which reversed the lower court's decision, allowing the law to go into effect on the grounds that it reasonably limits parents' rights. The thing about this, right? So not only do we have to worry about rights being eroded in places like Ohio, I live in Illinois. One of the things that I worry about is I think refugee is the right word. Refugees from other states, trans people or people of color, coming to Illinois and to get away from these laws. And maybe worry is the wrong word. Like, I want people to come here and be more safe. But also, if enough people come here, it could present a danger both to them and to everyone else by making Illinois a bigger target. That being said, like, Pritzker is seemingly doing everything he can to make sure that he can protect people in the state, which is laudable. I'm not going to say that I'm 100% behind Pritzker. I am, after all, an anarchist, and all authority needs to be questioned. But I do laud his efforts to keep the people of Illinois safe. Is there anything happening in the chat? No. Okay, so it turns out that is the last thing that I prepped for. Kind of. There are two more stories that I looked into, but one of them is going to be at the end of the hour. It's the last thing that I want to look over. And one of them is going to be the first story at the start of the next hour when we go over major journalism stuff. So, yeah. Here on out, we're flying by the seat of our pants. Let's look at this. NYPD shared a Palestinian protester's info with ICE, and now that is evidence in her deportation case. Regular green tea for anyone interested. This is another story from the Associated Press. One of these days I'm going to have to go over my methodology for doing these because, like, it's not... The methodology is fine. It's just, it's a matter of time. Let me put this in the chat. Let's go over this together. New York City's police department provided federal immigration authorities with an internal record about a Palestinian woman who they arrested at a protest, which the Trump administration is now using as evidence in its bid to deport her, according to court documents obtained by the Associated Press. The report, shared by the NYPD in March, includes a summary of information in the department's files about Leka Korid, I think that's how you pronounce that name, a New Jersey resident who was arrested at a protest outside Columbia University last spring. It lists her home address, date of birth, and an officer's two-sentence account of the arrest. Its distribution to federal authorities offers a glimpse into behind-the-scenes cooperation between the NYPD and the Trump administration, and raises questions about the city's compliance with sanctuary laws that prohibit police from assisting with immigration enforcement efforts. Yeah, here's the thing. There are some states, including Illinois, that ostensibly local police are not permitted to help ICE. They are not permitted to assist ICE. They are not permitted to give information to ICE unless they have a court order. And the problem with that is that a lot of cops, not just a lot of cops, are in all the way with Trump, but the organizations that lobby on behalf of police, sheriff's associations, they are like 155% in with Trump. You don't need to tell them to cooperate with the Trump administration because they love fascism. They love fascism because they don't see the people they police as human. There is a book. You need to look it up. There's a book I've been meaning to get by a guy named David Grossman. The Oppo research. David Grossman is a huge bad dude. Warrior mindset and on combat. David Grossman is, he started out as someone who trained soldiers, but went into the process of training law enforcement. But he trained law enforcement the same way that he trained soldiers, which is to say that he trained law enforcement in such a way that they view the people who they police as enemy combatants. I would hope I don't need to explain why that's a problem, but on the off chance I do, a guy who is drunk behind the wheel is not the same as an enemy combatant. Weird. They are not even remotely the same, and treating them as though they are the same is one of the several aggravating factors leading to the use of force becoming more and more pronounced in this country, and moreover, more and more lethal in this country. It's because the police don't view us as people. Which is something that needs to be emphasized more. So, Cordia was detained during a voluntary check-in with immigration officials in Newark, New Jersey on March 31st, then flown to an immigration jail in Texas. Another one of those scumfuck maneuvers. Her arrest was announced by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security the next day in a statement that cited an expired visa and her role in pro-Hamas protests. Apparently, if you're opposed to Israel mass murdering children in Gaza, you're pro-Hamas. Fucking absurd. I just remembered I checked this as not for children, so I can swear as much as I want. Belgium! No one's going to get that. So, this section is what NYPD shared with ICE. City law generally prohibits police from sharing information about arrests with federal immigration officials, although there are exceptions for criminal investigations. On March 14th, an NYPD officer generated a 4-page report. Generated. That's an interesting word, like generated with AI or just scrubbed a bunch of stuff. I'm sure they'll explain. On March 14th, an NYPD officer generated a 4-page report on Cordia and shared it with Homeland Security Investigations, a division of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. In an email statement, NYPD spokesperson said that the department received a request from a federal agency related to a criminal investigation and shared relevant information in accordance with our sanctuary city policies. The NYPD does not participate in programs that are designed for visa revocation or any civil immigration matter. The department declined to say what the investigation entailed, and inquiries into the DHS and ICE were not returned. Legal experts and civil liberties advocates say that the document reflected a worrisome level of information sharing between the city and the federal government, which has conflated criticism of Israel with support for Hamas, a U.S.-designated terror group. The intention of sanctuary laws is to protect against this kind of collusion and pretextual information sharing, said Madaga Philip, the director of special litigation at the Legal Aid Society. It seems to be a clear violation of the law, Philip added, and raises questions about what guardrails, if any, the NYPD has around sharing information with a federal government that is seeking to criminalize speech. Cordia's case stood out among those. I'm reading here. You can see me deciding what is and is not important in real time. You just saw me read this entire first paragraph. I'll skim the entire first paragraph. Cordia's case stood out among those ensnared by Trump's crackdown. She was not an outspoken activist and had not publicly criticized Israel, either in social media posts or newspaper op-eds. She maintained no social media presence and did not appear on any of the public lists maintained by pro-Israel groups that seek to identify people who participate in pro-Palestinian demonstrations. Her name was not mentioned in news reports about demonstrations. While the Trump administration identified her as a Columbia student, she has never been affiliated with a university and was not enrolled in any college when she joined a protest in 2024 outside Columbia. Her attorneys say she was peacefully voicing her dissent against Israel's military campaign in Gaza, which they said has killed over 100 of her relatives. Oh. Over 100. Like, I don't think I have 100 relatives. That's awful. Fuck Israel. A spokesperson for the NYPD declined to say when they were first approached by federal authorities or whether the March 14th report was the first time they had shared information about Cordia's arrest record. So, to rephrase that and to sort of break it down a bit, they just randomly found this person. They picked her up for something. I think they said they picked her up for something else. They might not have. But literally the only thing they had to go on whether or not to arrest her was a police report. A police report that was provided to them by the NYPD. She wasn't someone who was a public figure. Apparently she didn't even have social media accounts. But they still picked her up, and they still sent her away. I've talked before about how fascism is about purity, right? Like, they enforce purity through cruelty. And this is another utmost example of that. It's not just about... In fact, it is not even primarily about getting rid of people who dissent against the state, who dissent against actions. A thing that I feel like ordinary people don't quite get is that small, intensely cruel actions like this are of the utmost importance for this administration, because the cruelty is the point. The more cruelty they can bring to bear against individual activists and against individual people, the better. Fascism, the only way that it interacts with its citizens is through cruelty. And this is just an example of that. Like, you don't get ahead in fascism. It's just a matter of whether you just get your rations taken away or if you get sent to the super death camp, where you will be turned into rations. It's fucking horrible. Yeah, I can go over the rest of this. Beginning in early March, attorneys for Cordia say that federal agents began interrogating members of her family and neighbors. This is in March, early in March. They also subpoenaed records from her MoneyGram account and established a trace on her WhatsApp messaging account, her attorney said in a court filing. That's distressing. So I guess no more using WhatsApp. I don't use WhatsApp. I use Signal almost exclusively, but not even because I have anything to hide. I don't. But because it goes back to what I was saying about law enforcement before. Because they don't see you as human, when they decide that you're one of the bad guys, they will find or generate a pretext for anything they can to get rid of you. When they decide that you're one of the bad guys, they decide that you're one of the bad guys. And there's nothing that can be done to dissuade them from that. You stop being a person and you start becoming an enemy combatant. Remember that the next time you get pulled over for a speeding ticket, that officer sees you as an enemy combatant. The investigation revealed nothing except Miss Cordia sent a single payment to a Palestinian family member in 2022, which is itself protected First Amendment rights, the filing states. At an April 3rd hearing, the federal government pointed to Cordia's prior arrest for protesting as a reason she should not be released. An immigration judge found no evidence that she had acted violently at the protest and agreed to grant Cordia a $20,000 bond, which her family paid. The government has appealed that decision, keeping her detained for now. Oh, fuck you! That's not how bonds are supposed to work. In a petition seeking her release, attorneys for Cordia, a devout Muslim, said that she has been denied halal meals since arriving at the jail. As a result, she has lost 49 pounds, or 22 kilograms, and fainted in the shower, according to facility records shared with her attorneys. The government's entire argument that Miss Cordia is a danger to the United States rests on a single summons for her participation in a demonstration. Arthur Argo, her attorney, said, "The only reason she's confined right now is because of her political viewpoint." New York City Mayor Eric Adams, fuck that guy, has criticized the city's sanctuary protections, but insisted his administration has been meticulous about following them. When asked by the AP last month if the NYPD could turn over information to ICE about a summons issued to a protester, the mayor stressed it could only do so if there was a criminal investigation. "We're not allowed to collaborate for civil enforcement, period," Adams said. "We have no record that this happened," Adams added at this time. That's last month, April. This happened in March. On Friday, the mayor's office clarified that Adams had been referring to a different instance of a non-citizen who was sought by immigration authorities after being arrested by the NYPD at a protest. So yeah, that's pretty grim. I don't know if that is an indication that they're ramping up the cruelty, but either way, it's pretty ugly. Hold on just a minute. I've got to blow my nose. The Taco Ray is here. The Taco Ray, I'm to understand his real name is Henry, says it's much easier to discriminate against trans athletes than your neighbor or coworker. Yeah, that's something else to be... Like, of course, these people are trying to separate people based on, like, ethnicity and gender and sexuality and what have you. That's an easy way to do it. But, like, every study I've read says that that sort of splitting only very rarely holds up to actually meeting these people in person. There's a guy, a famous guy, one of my personal heroes, named Daryl Davis, who basically broke up the Klan in Virginia by going out and meeting every one of them in person. Like, one-on-one. He would go out and he would chat with these people and he would say, hey, I know what you think of black people. Let me tell you what I know about black people. And I don't know, I think it has to also be said, a lot of people misunderstand Daryl Davis and this whole thing. Like, people, especially far-right people, try to use what he does as proof that race is unimportant and racism is unimportant. No. First off, Daryl Davis is one of the most charismatic people who has ever lived in their life. But more important than that, a lot of these people who he talks to, all of them, I'm to understand, just never met a black person before. Their only experience with black people was seeing them on TV or hearing about them in the news. So meeting someone who was not only a super cool dude, but was also like, hey, no, I'm a real person. I'm a real person with real thoughts and real feelings. Shook their worldview off. It shook them out of their racist worldview. It's really interesting. It's really interesting. No, I don't want to go over that. This might be something worth going over. Henry says, I'm sure I could do the same thing as Daryl Davis, which is why I should be given unfettered access to the offices of the Daily Wire. I will be very kind, I promise. Knowing what I know about Henry, I have had to file several suits against him. Several FOIA requests regarding him. The folks at the Daily Wire would like him. So here's the next story we're going to go over, because it is interesting. Core Democratic groups are preparing to be targeted by the Trump administration. As President Donald Trump pushes the historical boundaries of executive power, some of the Democrats' core political institutions are preparing for the possibility that the federal government may soon launch criminal investigations against them. The Democrats' dominant national fundraising platform, ActBlue, and the party's largest protest group, Indivisible... Oh, that's disappointing. I didn't know that they were officially affiliated with the Democrats. That makes me sad. Are working with their attorneys for just such a scenario, according to officials within both organizations. Trump's top political allies have suggested both groups should face prosecution. Other Democratic allies are planning for Trump-backed legal crackdowns as well. Wary of antagonizing the Republican president, most prefer to stay anonymous for now. Every one of our clients is concerned about being arbitrarily targeted by the Trump administration. We are going to great lengths to help clients prepare for or defend themselves, said Urza Reese, a political chair at Elias Law Group, which represents Democratic groups and candidates and is chaired by Mark Elias, the lawyer who has himself been a Trump target. An FBI spokesperson declined to comment when asked about potential investigations into ActBlue and Indivisible. But White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt did not downplay the potential criminal probe when asked specifically whether Trump wants the FBI, the Treasury Department, or any other federal agency to investigate Democratic groups. Anyone who has not broken the law should not be worried, Levitt told the Associated Press. If you have broken the law and engaged in the weaponization of justice, then you should be worried. It's that simple. That's doublespeak, if I ever heard it. Indeed, far from distancing themselves from talk of retribution, many key Republicans are embracing it. Trump's allies argue that they are justified in seeking vengeance due to the 4 criminal prosecutions against Trump, one of which led to multiple felony convictions in New York. There is no evidence that then-President Joe Biden influenced the Trump prosecutions in any way. Matt Schlapp, president of the American Conservative Union, said Democrats need to be taught not to touch a hot stove. Fuck that guy. Condescending prick. Someone needs to get burned for all this activity or they're just gonna do it again, he said. And that's not hypocrisy. That's justice. So I'm of two minds here. Let me finish this. During a norm-breaking speech at the Department of Justice last month, Trump cast himself as the country's chief law enforcement officer, a title ordinarily reserved for the Attorney General. On April 9th, Trump signed an executive order instructing the Justice Department to investigate Miles Taylor, a former Department of Homeland Security official who anonymously penned a book highly critical of his first presidency. Trump said that Taylor was likely guilty of treason, a crime that can carry the death penalty. Henry says, as my hero Ben Shapiro once said, we must ban crime. So, just at a glance, I'm of two minds on this. On one hand, one of the reasons that I don't go over Trump world stuff very much is that they do so many things so often that it's difficult to tell if they're being serious about any given effort or if it's just them trying to keep something else, if it's them just shooting into the wind, or even if they're trying to cover another story that's damaging to them. And Trump has been trying incredibly hard to downplay, how bad the economy is going, and, trying to set up, these people are responsible for the economy going bad, not me. I feel like the threats against Democrats are the pretext to him doing that. Right? But on the other hand, threatening to use the law to silence political speech is something that needs to be taken seriously. So on one hand, it's like you have someone screeching slurs from, the top of a building where they can't get to you and you can't get to them. But on the other hand, it's that same thing, but with increasingly specific threats over the course of weeks. At some point, just for your own mental well-being, you have to do something about it. But on the other hand, too, you're not going to be able to arrest everyone in Indivisible. They even say here in the, this year alone, Indivisible groups have hosted more than 1,000 protests covering every state in the nation. The group was a key organizer in the recent hands-off protests that attracted hundreds of thousands of people across the country. You're not going to be able to arrest hundreds of thousands of protesters. No. it goes even further than that. You are not going to be able to effectively threaten hundreds of thousands of protesters. There is an entirely rational reason to not be very worried about this, and that reason is that Trump does not have enough boot to do what he is threatening to do. Short of him, like, launching nuclear weapons at Chicago and LA and New York, he's not going to be able to do what he's threatening to do. There would be a couple of, especially with the deportation stuff. Like, I don't think it's getting addressed enough exactly how much resources and manpower that's pulling. Which, benefit is not the right word, but it's something to bear in mind. These protests are more safe, at least in part, because the Trump administration is more interested in deporting people than they are in stopping people from protesting. Or just specifically because they're spending so much energy and time deporting people. This is an incredibly complicated topic. I might want to make a short video about it. Alright, this is going to be the last story of the hour. This is something that got brought up in my DSA group. This is two links, actually. This first one is a story from Al Jazeera. Israel bombs Yemen's Hodeidah port after attack near Tel Aviv. Airstrikes come a day after the Iran-aligned Houthis fired a missile that struck near Israel's main airport. The Israeli military says that it has carried out airstrikes on Yemen's Hodeidah port and a cement factory, claiming the sites were used to support Houthi operations against Israel. The strikes Monday injured at least 21 people, the Houthi-run health ministry spokesperson Anis al-Asabi said. According to the Israeli army, fighter jets struck infrastructure linked to the Houthis, including a cement factory that it described as an important economic resource used in building tunnels and military infrastructure. The Hodeidah seaport serves as a hub for the transfer of Iranian weapons and equipment for military needs. That claim could not be independently verified. Axios journalist Barak Ravid quoted a senior U.S. official who said that the air raids were coordinated between the U.S. and Israel. A U.S. defense source told Al Jazeera that U.S. forces did not participate in the Israeli strikes on Yemen today, but did not deny non-lethal support may have been provided. Okay, so that's one part of the story. But there's another thing. And I need to be careful about this. I want to emphasize when I say this. I really want to emphasize Rule 2. Do not panic. Do not catastrophize. Panic and confusion are as much our enemies as the people causing the panic and confusion. Having said that, this is important enough that I feel that it needs to be talked about. So, evidently, some Yemeni officials are claiming that they were attacked with a tactical nuclear bomb. I'll read this real quick. Fires are still raging in Yemen after Israeli airstrikes on al-Hadaya. Over 30 Israeli warplanes launched Operation Port City, targeting more than 10 sites, including the port and a concrete factory in Baji. The strikes, carried out in 8 waves, injuring 21 civilians. According to the Yemeni Health Ministry, Israel claims the assault was in response to Houthi hypersonic missiles. Yeah. There's a video of the burning. And here's a video of what looks like a mushroom cloud. So here's the thing, right? We need to be very critical of this. There are a lot of reasons. If there was a nuclear attack, there would be more than 21 civilians injured. There would be hundreds of people who had radiation burns, radiation sickness, who were blinded, and there would be immediate physical effects on the environment around the area. Those are the ways that you would identify a nuclear attack. It's not just a big bomb. A nuclear weapon is not just a big barrel of TNT. It's a countdown timer. It's more like a clock. But, on the other hand, we're pretty sure that Israel has nuclear weapons. And we are pretty sure, people who have been looking into this are pretty sure that Israel considered using nuclear weapons on Gaza. The only reason they decided not to is because they decided that the ocean wind would bring nuclear fallout into Israel. Yemen does not have that problem. If this is true, this is the mother of all crimes against the peace. It is unprecedented in modern times to attack with nuclear weapons. But I feel compelled to state, too, I feel it would be irresponsible not to state that the chances of this being a nuclear assault are, at least as far as I've seen, incredibly small. I bring this up just because people who I know, people in activist circles that I am in, have been made aware of this. And I want people to be more critical of these claims. You should be especially critical of claims that come from sources that you trust. You need to think about what people are saying and why they're saying it. Like, the big thing for me, there would be more than 21 civilians injured. The fallout alone from a nuclear weapon would be cataclysmic. Was cataclysmic. If you look at the fallout in both of the nuclear assaults on Japan, there were hundreds of thousands of people who spent the rest of their lives dealing with radiation sickness, with burns all over their bodies. And if that's not there, if that's not something that we see in this instance, then it was just a very powerful conventional bomb. It was just a big barrel of TNT. Alright, so, having said all that, I'm going to take a break for a minute. I'm going to do some stretches. And after that, we're going to go over some major journalism stories. I have an interesting story pulled up. about the Libertarian Party that I found. And we'll go over that. Everybody take a break. Go stretch. Go get something to drink. All right. We're back. Oh. That's not very good. We are in the second hour of the program. Typically, that means that we go over things from major journalist outlets. We are going to go over things from ProPublica. I've got a couple stories from ProPublica pulled up, a couple stories from The Lever, one from The Jacobin. But the first thing we're going to go over is the Independent Political Report. Before we do that, though, I will briefly remind that if you inexplicably feel like this live stream is worth supporting, and you have a couple of dollars you don't know what you're going to do with, I would be quite grateful if you were willing to send it my way. My computer is in need of several upgrades. My CPU, hard drives, and graphic cards are all 7 years old. Graphic card, singular, I only have the one. And also, if I'm upgrading all of that, I'm probably going to want to upgrade my motherboard to make sure everything works smoothly. Meaning that the only things I'm keeping from my computer are the 36 gig RAM sticks, the case, and the 700 watt power supply. Also, not for nothing, but I have bills to pay and groceries to buy. I'm going to start at $50 for this week. That for sure is going to go towards groceries and bills. After that, half of what I get is going to go to bills, and half is going to go to updating my computer. So if I get $150 this week, $100 of it will go towards bills, and $50 of it will go towards a new computer. Last week, I got, I think, $11. Yeah, I got $11 from someone, which I used for groceries, which I'm very grateful for. Thank you. Still just green tea and a little bit of fruit juice as a sweetener. All right. Let's go over what we're going over. Oh. Henry says most modern nuclear weapons don't actually have the fallout problem, although there will still be several severe localized effects. That's what I'm saying, is that more than anything, you would see more people injured than just 21, and you would see them injured in very specific ways. All right. LNC chair issues a stark warning about Libertarian Party's health following audit leak. I find odd stories like this frequently, that trawling Blue Sky and Reddit and Facebook. You find all kinds of news stories from all kinds of different outlets. I'm going to give you a peek behind the curtain. This is like just a little bit of the news sources I've collected. It's a lot. It's a lot. I've added this one to my repertoire in case they have any interesting reporting. I'll probably be checking in on them once a week. So, it says, Libertarian National Committee Chair Stephen Nekaya is warning members of the committee that the party is on the brink of failure if it does not take immediate and serious steps to reform its operations and unify behind its mission. In a message forwarded to the LCN Public Business on Friday, Nekaya sharply condemned the recent leak of an internal report, which he described as an attempt to score political points at the expense of the party's stability. He referred to the incident as pathetic and weak, but stressed that the report itself was necessary. We are an organization in dysfunction, Nekaya wrote. We are bleeding every month. Our membership is in decline, donor trust is shattered, our staff, the few that are left, are overworked, underpaid, and still somehow showing up while we play political games and throw sand in the gears. Nakaya's remarks follow the unauthorized release of excerpts from a strategic audit prepared by the consulting firm Strategists, Inc., which the Libertarian Party hired earlier this year to assess its organizational health. The excerpt outlines severe staffing shortages, internal dysfunction, and growing staff dissatisfaction with board behavior. According to the leaked section, which was circulated online by someone who received it through a member of the board and confirmed is authentic by a committee alternate, the party is operating with only 2 full-time staff and a part-time executive director. The remaining personnel are largely contractors balancing other full-time work. The report described this staffing model as not ideal and unsustainable for a national organization. Staff are reportedly embarrassed by board behaviors and are discouraged by frequent interference in their work. Strategists Inc.'s assessment also noted that recent staffing cuts, including the loss of party's last in-house fundraiser with major donor contacts, have further weakened operations. Despite this, the report praised the leadership of the party's executive director, Hannah Kennedy, describing her as a very effective manager who has earned the trust of her team and demonstrated resilience amid a challenging environment. Nakaya's response pledged for a renewed focus on unifying and stabilizing the party, outlining a revival of Project Archimedes, mandatory fundraising benchmarks, and the hiring of a professional development lead and creation of a support team. He warned that continued infighting and obstruction would no longer be tolerated. "If you're here to build, let's get to work," he wrote. "If you're here to stir shit, sabotage, or ride this thing into the ground with a smirk, get the hell out of the way. We still have a window. Barely." And I'm going to share that. Gonna title that Libertarian Party in This is from the Independent Political Report, your premier source on third parties and independent candidates since 2008. And I thought that it was worth taking seriously specifically because it uses information that's verified in other sources. If you're looking for, not unbiased, but if you're looking for something that's worth looking into, that's something that you want to look for. Like, these people are citing someone else. And let's look over, because it's linked, let's look over the thing that they're talking about, which is, unfortunately, on the fascist hellhole platform. 4. Staffing. This is the part that was leaked. They're starting at part 4. Staffing and morale. The LNC is under-resourced for its national scope. Only 2 full-time staff members are employed, and the executive director is part-time, 32 hours a week. The remaining team comprises of contractors, many of whom hold other full-time positions, what they said in the article. That means, understandably, that LNC is rarely the first priority for many of its staffers or contractors. The organization cannot be the first priority for those who have full-time positions, no matter how committed they are. The staffing model is not ideal. The executive director has created a functional organization chart which works in theory, but is under-resourced currently. The recent cuts to staff have not helped. She has to duplicate her efforts for every type of meeting because lack of overlapping staffing schedules, which is incredibly inefficient. Piecemeal approaches to staffing are not ideal for long-term sustainability. The staff contractor group is highly engaged in executing the mission of the organization. They are passionate about the organization's purpose for being. They are embarrassed by board behaviors that are less than exemplary and find them very demoralizing and discouraging. The collective staff members long for a mature governing board that will create a collective vision, raise the resources it needs, drive the organization forward, and provide a stable environment for its employees and contractors in which to produce results together. I'm going to link this real quick. I don't like linking to the fascist hellhole website, but sometimes It's unavoidable. But yeah. That's the thing that they're referring to here. There's more to it. Again, look over it. I read over the whole story, but yeah. Libertarians are interesting. Like, in a political sense, libertarian is sort of a misnomer. They're more liberals. In a pseudo-classical liberal sense. They're not, like, Democrat liberals. They're people who believe that, they very explicitly believe that rights are derived from property. So much so that, like, they even frame your human rights as you having a right to your physical body. Now, I find that to be loathsome. I find that to be an incredibly loathsome way of framing human rights and the need for human well-being. But on the other hand, individual libertarians are some of the people most committed to civil rights that I've ever met. Like, people who are on the ground about it are incredibly serious. So, it interests me, right? Because the thing that we're observing, like, on a worldwide scale, is that liberalism as an ideology, specifically neoliberal global capitalism, is failing. It's failing because it is coming against problems like climate change, like stark inequality, like corporations rewriting the law, that it does not have the power to push back against. It's to the point where the people who are most effectively using libertarian ideals are not themselves libertarians, they're fascists. And they're using libertarianism as a pretext to strip people of their rights, something that liberals generally would be opposed to. Lots of people in the Libertarian Party don't like Trump. I did a video about the Libertarian Party, and hold on, let me look that up real quick. I did a video where I talked about some feedback I got from the Libertarian Party a while back. I'm going to find it and link it in the thing. No. I don't think it's that one. I don't think it's that one. I don't remember which one it is. That sucks. But I have had interactions with the Libertarian Party in the past, and they're dedicated people. And I feel like the failure of the Libertarian Party is indicative of a broader failure of liberalism worldwide. People are realizing that this ideology doesn't work anymore. And they're changing it. They're changing their ideas. So, next story. Remember when I was talking about my sort of disconnected thoughts on arresting people who, arresting fucking Democrats? Well, who would have an article about that except Politico? Let me drop this in the chat. This article, again from Politico, is defending the January 6th rioters. That is the wrong way of phrasing that. Defending January 6th rioters and investigating Democrats. How Ed Martin is weaponizing the Department of Justice for Trump. As interim U.S. Attorney in D.C., Martin has fired career prosecutors, dropped Capitol riot cases, and launched sweeping probes into Trump's political enemies. When President Donald Trump chose Ed Martin, the Missouri lawyer and political operative, to be the top U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., the decision came as a shock to current and former federal prosecutors as well as outside legal experts. Martin had no prosecutorial experience. He was best known as a conservative activist, the former right-hand man to an influential and anti-feminist icon Phyllis Schlafly, and a loyal Trump surrogate. Since taking charge of the office in January, Martin has launched controversial investigations, rushed to defend Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, and vowed to change how his office prosecutes crime in the District of Columbia. His actions have been met with fierce pushback from Democratic lawmakers, watchdog groups, and legal experts. There have been at least 4 disciplinary complaints filed against him with the D.C. and Missouri bars. One of the D.C. complaints has been dismissed, the other 3 appear to be pending. If Martin has responded to the complaints, his statements have not been made public. Martin did not respond to repeated requests for comment. Here are some of Martin's most contentious moves so far. January 6th retribution. At Trump's discretion, Martin has presided over the dismissal of outstanding cases that were part of the Justice Department's investigation into the January 6, 2021 riots at the Capitol. But Martin got tripped up by what should have been a legal formality. In one of the cases he dismissed, he was still listed as counsel of record for the defendant, a possible conflict of interest. The incident prompted bar complaints against Martin in D.C. and Missouri. The D.C. bar's disciplinary panel dismissed the complaint, saying Martin had been acting at behest of the president. The Missouri complaint appears to be pending. They were referring to that before, yeah. Martin fired more than a dozen federal prosecutors who worked on the January 6 cases. He demoted 7 senior lawyers in his office, including the 2 prosecutors who led the January 6 team, to low-level roles in D.C. Superior Court, which handles local prosecutions. Most of the affected attorneys have not commented publicly, but those who have are critical of Martin's tenure. Martin has opened an investigation into supposed leaks related to the January 6 cases, saying the information was used by the media and partisans as misinformation. He also ordered an investigation into past charging decisions made as part of the January 6 cases. In 2024, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the DOJ's use of an obstruction state in those prosecutions. In an office-wide email obtained by ProPublica, Martin quoted an unnamed contact to compare the DOJ's use of the obstruction statute to President Franklin Roosevelt's decision to imprison more than 100,000 Japanese Americans in its internment camps during World War II. Need to go blow my nose again. Just a sec. Sorry about that. I have bad allergies. So, the first thing to note here, the first thing that ProPublica notes, is that this guy, what's his name again? Ed Martin. He's a Trump loyalist, and he's a loyalist to the conservative cause. Enough so that he was an assistant to Phyllis Schlafly, who died years ago. And the thing about Trump and people like him is that they do not reward competence, and they do not punish incompetence. Those things are mostly inconsequential. What they do is they reward loyalty and punish disloyalty. It is mere loyalty to the cause, and that is important. If you do something bad on behalf of the president, you're still rewarded, even if that thing is ostensibly illegal and you should be getting in trouble for it. On the other hand, if you do something correctly, but you do it in such a way that it isn't, but if it is something that the president told you not to do, or it's gang shit. It's gang shit. Trump is acting like a fucking gangster. And I feel like that squares the circle of a lot of things that people don't understand about Trump. He rewards loyalty and punishes disloyalty and nothing else. And you see that too in how Martin is running the department. The people who are disloyal to Trump are being punished, in spite of the fact that, they were prosecuting people who tried to do an insurrection. Alright, let's move on to the next part. Martin has published several open letters to Musk on the Musk-owned social media platform Shit. Yes, I'm still pronouncing it like that. In the first letter, dated February 3rd, Martin asked Musk to utilize me and take my staff to protect the people and work of Doge. He vowed to take any and all legal action against anyone who impeded Doge's work. We will not act like the previous administration, Martin added, who looked the other way as Antifa and BLM rioters, as well as thugs with guns, trashed our capital city. That's a yikes. That's a pretty big yikes there. Because you see, he's referring to January 6th. He thinks those people, or at least he's outwardly stating that those people were BLM and Antifa. That's how people within that movement now are explaining what happened. No, it wasn't the people who were actually there. It was our political enemies. It's bullshit, but the bullshit is half the point. It's about the cruelty. It's always about the cruelty. It's a reason to inflict more cruelty on their political opponents. In his second letter, dated February 7th, Martin expanded on his pledge to his offices to use his... My eyes. My poor sorry eyes. In his second letter, dated February 7th, Martin expanded on his pledge to his office's legal powers in support of Musk and Doge's work. Please let me reiterate again. If people are discovered to have broken the law or even acted simply unethically, we will investigate them and we will chase them to the ends of the earth to hold them accountable, Martin wrote. He urged his employees to respond to Musk's demand that all federal employees list 5 things they have accomplished that week, adding, Doge and Elon are doing great work. Historic. And when Doge employees attempted to seize control of the U.S. Institute of Peace, a private nonprofit that receives government funding, Martin and his office assisted so that Doge could take over and wind down the nonprofit. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but that last thing sounds illegal. They shouldn't be able to take over a nonprofit. The U.S. Attorney's Office for D.C. is unique in that it prosecutes both federal and local crimes. In his tweets and public statements, Martin has vowed to make D.C. safe again, even though violent crime has broadly declined in the district in recent years. While his public safety agenda is light on detail so far, he has pledged to be a stalwart defender of the D.C. police. In yet another open letter posted on X, Martin wrote that the radical defund the police movement by Black Lives Matter is over, and that it was time to get back to protecting and supporting our law enforcement officers. I did a short about this. a while back. Police are facing staffing shortages, major staffing shortages, all over the country. And a lot of them are blaming defund the police and BLM. But the truth of the matter is, they beat the shit out of so many people. They beat the shit out of so many people in 2020, and it was televised. People didn't have anything else to watch. People didn't really have anything to do but go out and protest. Because of, the COVID. So, people now are like, I don't want to be the guy that beats up an elderly man for trying to help me in the street. Current and former federal prosecutors in D.C. say Martin's actions so far could have undercut morale in the office, while his proposed reforms could make it harder, not easier, for prosecutors to do their jobs. In February, Martin removed the chief and deputy chief of the Federal Major Crimes Section, which oversees cases involving drugs, firearms possession, child exploitation, human trafficking, and immigration violations. The two lawyers, who had decades of experience between them and were widely respected, were demoted to low-level roles. The more senior of the two, Melissa Jackson, resigned soon after. Jackson declined to comment. Her deputy did not respond to requests for comment. Martin also said he was rewriting the office's policy for so-called Lewis List, a repository of police officer disciplinary records. Prosecutors consult the Lewis database when they decide whether to put a police officer on the witness stand. They also use the Lewis List to identify officers about whom they need to disclose information to defense attorneys that bears on a witness's credibility or potential bias to fulfill their constitutional obligations. Minor tangent. The Lewis List is a thing. I should not be doing that here. It's a real thing, and, anyone can access it. I thought I had it saved. I thought I had a link to it. I might not. But yeah, it's a thing, at least as of a couple of months ago, anyone could access. Martin framed his decision, we're going back to reading. Martin framed his decision to reform the Lewis List as part of a broader shift to be more pro-police. USAO will no longer allow judges or others to gratuitously damage your careers because of the outsized impact of inexact characterizations, he wrote. Michael Romano, former federal prosecutor and D.C. office, said that any effort to weaken or eliminate the Lewis List will only make it harder for prosecutors to argue and win cases because it would deprive them of information that they must disclose in court. Gutting the Lewis List makes it less likely that prosecutors will obtain convictions at trial and makes it more likely that convictions will be reversed on appeals and puts prosecutors' licenses to practice law at risk. And here's the thing that we were talking about before, investigating Democrats. Martin has initiated multiple inquiries into critics and opponents of Trump. Martin asked Representative Eugene Vindman, a Democrat from Virginia, for information about a business that Vindman and his brother, Alexander, started to support Ukraine in its war against Russia, the Washington Post reported. Vindman and his twin brother, Alex, both blew the whistle on Trump's attempt to withhold military aid to Ukraine while pressuring the country's leader to investigate the family of President Joe Biden. Eugene Vindman said that Martin's letter was part of Trump's retribution campaign, and that those who wrote the letter encouraged this weird attempt at intimidation are lying. Biden's family members and former officials from his administration received letters from Martin's office related to the ex-president's decision to grant pardons to people close to him, the New York Times reported. Trump has pushed an unproven theory that Biden's actions weren't valid because he wasn't mentally competent. If simply not being mentally competent is reason enough to dismiss the president's actions, then half the shit that Reagan did, right out the window. Right out the window. And the entire baby Bush presidency, all 8 years out of it, right out the window. Right out the window. Martin also sent letters to Chuck Schumer of New York and Robert Garcia of California, both Democrats, asking them to answer questions about incendiary public comments they had made. The inquiries appeared to have fizzled out and did not result in any charges. Targeting medical journals. On April 4th, Martin sent a list of questions to the editor of Chest Magazine, a medical journal published by the American College of Chest Physicians. The letter accused the journal and others like it of being partisans in various scientific debates and asked a series of contentious questions, such as, how do you clearly articulate when you have certain viewpoints that are influenced by your ongoing relations with supporters, funders, advertisers, and others, and how do you handle allegations that authors of works in your journals may have misled readers? 2 other medical journal publishers received similar letters, the New York Times reported. The letters have raised grave concerns about curbing free speech and government intimidation of scientific publications. So yeah. That's this scumbag. He's doing Trump's dirty work, and I don't know. I feel like my sense of it is that a lot of what he's doing is just bluster. He's just trying to intimidate people. He's trying to intimidate people on behalf of the administration because, you know, that's what these people do. They intimidate. But there are solid action. There are things that he's doing. The Lewis List especially, that's fucked. Getting rid of the Lewis List is a bad idea. The thing that we need to bear in mind, though, in regards to all of these people, including Trump, is that all of their powers are more or less clearly printed out. There are rules to what they can and cannot do. And not only are things they cannot do going to be immediately and ferociously opposed, but considering the state of things, more often than not, the things that they can do are going to be immediately and ferociously opposed. It's worth noting. So they can do a lot of very specific damage within their purview, but outside of their purview, there's not as much as that they can do. Okay. Here's something interesting. Just gonna paste this in chat. This lender said its loans would help Tennesseans. It has sued more than 110,000 of them. So this is an article, I'm reading it from ProPublica, but it was produced for ProPublica in partnership with the Tennessee Lookout, which is, I am assuming, a local outlet from Tennessee. I'm going to add that to the list. Rosita Hansen was working on an evening shift at a tubing factory in 2023 when a sheriff's deputy showed up and handed her a court summons. She was being sued for failing to pay off a loan of $2,050. What confused Hansen was she had already paid a couple thousand more than she borrowed, but now the company, Advance Financial, said she owed more. Between what she'd already paid the company and the lawsuit, Advance stood to receive over $12,500 from Hansen, records show. Hansen, 57, had taken out the loan in 2021 after her mortgage company threatened to foreclose on her modest three-bedroom house outside Morrisontown, a small city in East Tennessee. Hansen made enough money to support herself, but after taking in her 4 grandchildren, she struggled to cover the costs of extra food and school supplies, and she stopped paying her mortgage. That's when she turned to Advance. I was providing for all of them, Hansen said. Financially, it was rough. 2021, that was during COVID, that would be rough. Like most borrowers, Hansen could not afford an attorney to handle the suit, but she hoped to work out a payment plan with Advance. When she arrived at the Hamlin County Courthouse in Morristown in May 2023, she was directed to a line of half a dozen people waiting to meet with an attorney representing the company. Across Tennessee, Advance has sued more than 110,000 people since 2015, significantly more than any other payday lender, making it one of the largest plaintiffs of any Tennessee-based company collecting debt. In Hansen's Appalachian County of 66,000, where nearly half the households make less than $50,000, the company has filed one case per every 32 residents over that time, the Tennessee Lookout and ProPublica found. Advance began filing thousands of lawsuits soon after Tennessee lawmakers approved the Flex Loan, a product pioneered by Advance in Tennessee. The loan's $4,000 cap is 9 times higher than the limit for most payday loans, and the company charges the equivalent of a 279.5% annual interest rate. Jesus Christ! That's monstrous. That's 280 times. That's almost 3 times as much. You're paying back almost 3 times as much as you're borrowing. That's absurd. Before flex loans became legal, we're going to go back to reading. Before flex loans became legal in 2015, payday lenders could only lend $425, and the borrower could never be required to pay back more than $500. Since then, those protections have been eliminated, and thousands of borrowers have been defaulting. Flex loans only stop growing when they're completely paid off, when a flex lender declares the loan is in default, or when it sues the borrower. If the loans do end up in court, the law allows lenders to recoup attorney's fees, which can't be done with payday loans, a practice that can add up to a third of the loan amount. Just fuck these people. Court judgments against customers are often thousands of dollars, with some exceeding $10,000, records show. About 40% of all cases end with wage garnishment, court records show. Court judgments of $10,000 for a $4,000 loan. That's ghoulish. The consequences of flex loans were predicted when the Tennessee legislature legalized them 10 years ago, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau wanted to regulate products like flex loans when Congress created the agency in 2011. The Trump administration's efforts to dismantle CFPB are currently being reviewed in the courts. Advance has argued that the new product would help consumers by offering them loans that are technically cheaper than a payday loan. It downplayed concerns from consumer advocates that these high-interest loans targeted and trapped low-income borrowers in debt they could never pay off. The company's leaders made their case just as federal regulators planned to crack down on other Tennessee lenders for making different high-interest loans to people they knew could not pay them back. After just a few years, evidence started mounting that the loans were exacting a high toll on low-income borrowers while generating huge profits for lenders. Since then, the flex loan has buried tens of thousands of Tennesseans, such as Hansen, in a deep financial hole. Gabe Kravitz, a consumer finance researcher at the Pew Charitable Trusts, said loans above $1,000 paired with triple-digit interest rates are hard to pay off. It gets very expensive very quickly, he said. Only a few other states have approved products similar to the flex loan, but unlike Tennessee, where other states saw problems with the loans, they acted to rein them in. Virginia allowed banks to make line of credit loans, but had never seen the need to cap interest rates as banks competed for customers. But soon after Advance showed up, regulators noticed the company filing thousands of lawsuits. The state attorney general's office investigated the company for deceptive practices in 2020, ultimately labeling the company as predatory and helping to pass legislation to shut down flex loan-like products in the state. Advance declined to answer a question about the Virginia Attorney General's investigation. California and North Dakota also passed bills capping interest rates on open-ended lines of credit after Advance and other companies began to operate in those states. The Lookout and ProPublica sent Advance Financial detailed questions about its operations, including each of the cases cited in the article. Cullen Ernest, the Senior Vice President of Policy at Advance Financial, declined to answer specific questions and said that he could not discuss individual cases due to privacy concerns. Ernest said in an email that the company has an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau. He also added that the Tennessee Department of Financial Institutions has received just 91 complaints on flexible credit lenders since 2020, representing less than 0.001% of all new flex loan agreements, and that this data reflects satisfaction of the vast majority of Advance's customers. Company records show that Hansen made her twice-a-month payments on time, paying over $6,600 in 10 months. The required minimum monthly payments are supposed to act like a safety net, ensuring borrowers pay enough to cover the interest, fees, and 3% of the principal. But many times after Hansen made a payment, the company allowed her to immediately borrow the principal back, which she often did, extending the time it would take to pay off the loan. After almost a year of payments, she still owed more than $3,000. So here's something. This is something I like about ProPublica, is that they'll visualize things. Rosita Hansen, this is her billing history. and ended up owing evidently a total of over $12,000 from borrowing $4,385 because of interest and court fees. These payday loans are necessarily predatory. Like, they make gangbusters off of this, and it's predatory. They predate on people who can't afford, who are in immediate need of something. And, they say, oh, we fulfill a need, but they fulfill that need in the worst possible way. Literally, fucking gangsters. Literally, mob loans are less predatory than these kinds of loans. Partially because the mob won't take you to fucking court over it. But mostly because, you can reason with mobsters. You can't reason with a fucking capitalist. And we're going back. We're going back to the article. Hansen said she knew the loan was costly. Every loan statement warned this is an expensive form of credit. Only borrow what you can afford to pay back. But she didn't realize how hard it would be to keep up with the interest and fees. The loan from Advance only made Hansen's financial situation worse. As the payments became too much to handle, she lost her house. But the Flex loan continued to grow, almost doubling in size by the time she received a court summons a year later. So she took out the loan to pay the mortgage on her house, but she lost her house anyway. That's fucked. Yeah. Michael and Tina Hodges started their payday lending business in the 1990s with a few stores in Nashville. The company, called Advance Payday, steadily expanded, making payday loans and offering products like bus passes, check cashing, and money transfers. In 2009, the Hodges told a local news outlet that they wanted to shed the image of a simple payday advance company, and so the company took on a new name, Advance Financial. By 2010, Advance had generated a modest $15 million in revenue from about 24 stores, according to statements it made in news reports at the time. Which means that, by today's count, they will be a member of the 1% club. $15 million, you're in the 1%. Statistically. Not long after, the growing business collided with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, a federal regulator Congress created after the banking crisis. The CFPB had started to take aim at high-interest payday lenders, releasing a 2013 report on the dangers of the loans as debt traps. A subsequent agency report found that payday lenders, particularly in Tennessee, relied heavily on offering loans to those who couldn't afford them. Advance declined to respond to a question about the CFPB report. Looking for an alternative product that wouldn't fall under the CFPB's looming regulations, Advance turned to Tennessee lawmakers who have power over statewide interest rates. The company hired Earnest, the former top aide for the Tennessee Department of Financial Institutions, which regulates payday lenders. It also opened up a political action committee and began to push lawmakers to allow it to create the Flex loan. In a hearing discussing Flex loan legislation before its passage, Earnest told a Tennessee Senate committee that the new loan was like a line of credit you could get at a bank, acknowledging that it would be a little bit more expensive. But the proposal added significant potential costs. To allow lenders to circumvent the state's interest rate cap, the legislators simply called the interest something else, a customary fee. The law would permit flex lenders to charge 24% interest plus a daily fee until the loan is paid off. The fee is calculated by multiplying the loan amount by 0.7%. Over 365 days, the fee adds 255.5% to the cost of the loan. Advance's own documentation tells borrowers that although the state and Advance call it a fee, the federal government sees it for what it is: an interest rate. So, the bill passed the state Senate without opposition. In the House, only Democratic State Representative Mike Stewart spoke against the bill, which passed overwhelmingly and was later signed by Republican Governor Bill Halsom. So basically, these scum fucks paid the legislature to pass a bill making their kinds of payday loans unique and not able to be legislated by the federal government. Scumfuck behavior. Peak scumfuck behavior. Going back to the article, Stewart pointed out that the new law allowed companies to recoup attorney's fees in court, something payday lenders had not been allowed to do, and a practice he knew as a lawyer would likely increase the number of lawsuits. The legislation was structured to maximize the amount of money they could extract from these debtors. Stewart, who has since left the legislature, said in an interview, "After the legalization of the flex loan, Advance Financial business boomed. The company expanded to all corners of Tennessee, growing to 105 locations by the end of the 2010s. So, by 2019. 2018, 2019, maybe 2020. As a private loan company, Advance is not required to release financial information, but Advance and the Hodges were vocal about their success, at least at first. The company self-reported to the Nashville Business Journal in 2019 that it made $392 million, quintupling its revenue from the year before it started offering the flex loan and making more than 25 times as much as it had at the start of the decade. Scumfuck behavior." Advance's revenue no longer appeared in any of the Business Journal's lists after 2019. These numbers parallel the growth of the flex loan industry in Tennessee. By 2019, all flex lenders across the state had generated about $730 million in operating income, a number that has continued to grow, according to state records. In 2022, the latest available year of data, flex lenders earned $880 million in operating income. The company is one of the top campaign donors to Tennessee politicians, having spent roughly $2.5 million since 2014. Advance has also spent over $3 million lobbying state lawmakers over the past decade. And I want to put that number in perspective. They made, in 2022 alone, they made $880 million. And since 2014, they've spent $2.5 million. $2.5 plus $3, $5.5 million. If you have $1, if you have $100, and you spend $5.50 on it, that's nothing. Peak scumfuck behavior. They have $880 million, and they're spending $5.5 on lobbying and getting everything out of it. Peak scumfuck behavior. The legislators don't even have the wherewithal to ask for more fucking money from them. It's embarrassing. Going back to the article, the Hodges have also made roughly $10 million in political donations to to federal candidates since 2014, including over $3 million to support President Donald Trump's campaigns. Scumfucks. In a 2019 recording obtained by the Washington Post, Hodges told a payday lending industry group his political donations granted him better access to Trump. Hodges told the Post he was an enthusiastic supporter of Trump and never used his status to ask the Trump administration for help. A Trump-appointed CFPB director rescinded most of the payday lending regulations in 2020. A new Trump administration has tried to gut the CFPB, but an appeals court on April 28th upheld a lower court ruling preventing the acting CFPB director from firing about 90% of the department's employees. Today, Advance's only product is the Flex Loan. And so this is an instance, not only did politicians not protect people, but they actively made the problem worse. It's embarrassing. We had a similar problem to this in Illinois, but the legislature took care of it to the point where, I think my mother took out a payday loan in 2008, I want to say. 2006, maybe 2008. And paid it back. And she was still eligible to get recompense from the payday loan company. And did. I think that's how I remember it. I would not say that in court. I would need to double check. Going back to the article, before FlexLoan, court records show that payday lenders like Advance rarely took borrowers to court. The low $500 cap on loan amounts made the prohibition on collecting attorney's fees often made suing people unprofitable. The FlexLoan law changed all that, unleashing a wave of lawsuits. Across the 59 counties where electronic court records are available, home to over 4/5 of the state's roughly 7 million people, Advance has brought one lawsuit for every 50 residents since 2015, according to data analysis by the Tennessee Lookout and ProPublica. For Tanya Davis, a single mother who works at a local hospital, Advance waited 6 years to sue. Tennessee's debt collection law allows lenders to file a suit within 6 years and, if the company wins a judgment in court, to pursue the debt for another decade. Davis lives in Davidson County. Davis lives in Davidson County, where Advance operates more stores than any other county in Texas. Advance has filed over 22,000 lawsuits in Davidson County over the decade since it began offering flex loans, its highest county total. Its stores in Nashville, which is located in that county, are generally in the neighborhoods where households have lower incomes. Davis said that Advance contacted her in 2018, claiming she owned money on a flex loan taken out the previous year. Davis said she never borrowed the money and she was a victim of identity theft, a claim the company told her it would look into after she told Advance in a phone call that the Social Security number on the account wasn't hers. The company never reached out to her, and she said, and for years she heard nothing from Advance, but in 2024 she received a summons declaring it was suing her for almost $48,000. At the time, Davis was caring for her dying mother and missed her court hearing. Because she didn't appear, Advance won a default judgment against her for the full amount. Davis could not afford an attorney, so she filed an appeal on her own, but she never got a chance to challenge the judgment. Soon after the hearing began, attorneys for Advance noticed that Davis had filed her appeal one day past the filing deadline, and the judge denied her appeal. The company's default judgment means Davis is required to pay Advance $175 a month. Fuck that so hard. Fuck that. That genuinely makes me mad. Someone stole her identity, right? Someone stole her identity, took out a loan, And they're saying she has to pay it back anyway. And this is happening during COVID, while her mother is fucking dying. Peak scumfuck behavior. Absolutely unacceptable. Going back to the article. I'm not a lawyer, Davis said in an interview. I'm trying to do the best I can with what I have. I don't know anything about this, or I would have paid, but they didn't even give me the opportunity to present my information. Challenging Advance in court can be daunting. When Advance goes to court for a flex loan, it wins the majority of the time, in part because borrowers often fail to show up, and in part because the company has more legal resources. The company has won over $200 million in judgments since the start of 2015. They made $800 million in profit, which means that about a quarter of their profits are from judgments against people. Mandy Spears, the deputy director of the Tennessee-based think tank, the Sycamore Institute, said in court that lenders have all the advantages because they have lawyers with vast experience in the system. It's just complicated for the average person versus a more sophisticated business or law firm, she said. It's really a gap in knowledge and expertise. Many defendants don't realize that when they fail to appear in court, the company doesn't have to provide detailed documents proving what a borrower owes. Teresa Sheldon, a 27-year-old mother in McMinnville, thought she paid off her loan with Advance Financial in 2020. When the company sued her almost 3 years later, she missed her court hearing because she was 8 months pregnant and on bed rest. A judge ruled her in default, and Advance won a judgment for $47,000. Sharon didn't keep any documentation after paying off her loan, but she said she reached out to Advance's lawyer to dispute the lawsuit. The company has not sought to garnish her wages, but she remains in limbo. Under law, the company can choose to file a wage garnishment any time in the next 10 years to recover the judgment amount. My only worry is them attempting to collect, Sharon said. I don't have anything. Marla Williams, a consumer law attorney for the Legal Aid Society of Middle Tennessee, is one of a handful of lawyers who've helped defend borrowers against Advance. In several cases, Williams has been able to block wage garnishments and reduce the customary fee the company charges. Williams said that in a 2024 case, she was able to lower the payments from an unaffordable several $100s a month to around $50 a month, which her client could afford. Advance fought the reduction, but a judge ruled in her favor. Another case, Williams said Advance tried to charge a borrower thousands of dollars in additional fees months after he stopped paying the loan. After a hearing, which most borrowers without lawyers don't ask for, a judge reduced the fees, calling the added charges unconscionable and unjust. Williams said the company often uses aggressive tactics in court, something she's observed over the past decade. This is their business model, she said. Sometimes Advance already made money off the borrower before suing them, as in the case of Hansen. Over 10 months, Hansen paid Advance nearly $2,200 more than she borrowed, records show. She still owed almost $3,000 when she stopped paying Advance. The company waited around 3 months before declaring her in default, letting her debt grow before it sued her several months later. With the addition of attorney's fees and court-added interest, the company sued her for $6,000. Hansen, who has to use her maiden name because she's no longer married, lost her home in 2022, moving into an apartment which she said cost more than her mortgage had. This is the person at the beginning who was taking care of 4 children who moved into her household. Peak scumfuck behavior. Hansen says she plans to pay back Advance by the summer. A February bonus check, which the company garnished 25% of, has helped. I understand that it's every person for themselves, and they're out to make a buck, hence instead about advance. But you know what? People out there are struggling every single day, and that's what they take advantage of. The link to that story is in the description. Not the description, the chat here if any of the 3 people watching want to look at it. It's offensive. This is offensive. It ought to be offensive to anyone of any moral inclination. I need to blow my nose again. I'll be right back. So, the thing that I love, and the thing that makes it difficult to talk about ProPublica, articles like this are, like, they ought to be the benchmark for what investigative journalism is. This tells you everything that you need to know. And it says it without... I say it says it without judgment, but the judgment is baked in. They don't need to tell you that these people are engaging in peak scumfuck behavior. Anyone who reads the article observes that. And just don't take out payday loans, I guess. Especially if you live in Tennessee. These people are predatory to the point where they're destroying entire fucking economies. It's awful. It's awful, it's horrible, and something needs to be done about it. Wow, it's 12:30. I did not realize. We have time for exactly one more article. I'll flip a coin. My lucky coin. I say lucky. Someone, when I was working in Dollar General, I wanted to make a video about this, I might still, walked into Dollar General, saw that I was having a bad day, and gave me a gold-plated quarter. And the more I think about this, the more I love it. Like, this is an incredible work of art. Not just because it's, like, genuinely just a small bit of beauty, but also because it makes the quarter fucking worthless. Okay, so heads, we're going to go over the Lovers tax revolt article, and tails, we'll go over shareholder payouts. That's tails. Came up tails. So let's go over this. I wasn't able to look over this ahead of time. This is an article by the Jacobin, I think. Yep. Jacobin, one of them. It's pronounced in one of those ways. Bigger shareholder payouts are driving up corporate profits. Corporations are set to use Trump's trade war as justification for raising prices, just as they previously used supply chain shutdowns. But a new Federal Reserve study notes that higher prices have coincided with big increase in payouts to shareholders. Corporations are preparing to cite Donald Trump's trade war as justification for my poor sorry eyes. My poor sorry throat. Corporations are preparing to cite Donald Trump's trade war as justification for raising prices, just as they previously cited pandemic supply chain slowdowns to raise prices. It's a familiar tactic. They want us to believe macroeconomic forces mean they have no choice but to fleece us. However, a new Federal Reserve study notes that ever higher prices have coincided with a sudden increase in corporate profit-taking. Those profit increases are fueled by a quest for dividend payouts to company shareholders rather than for resources to reinvest in companies, all while employee compensation declines. Employee compensation meaning people getting paid. Inflation should not automatically increase profit margins. Businesses may be charging more for products, but they also face higher input costs. Yet inflation has coincided with an unprecedented rise in profit margins, according to the February study. Whereas profits averaged 13.9% of national income over the 2010 to 19 period, a surge began in 2020, and by the end of 2024, corporate profits comprised more than 16% of national income. %16% of national income. So, for every dollar that somebody made, for every dollar that was made in the United States in 2024, 15 cents of that, 16 cents of that, went to corpo scumbags. I want to read that one later. At the same time, employee compensation, people getting paid, as a share of national income decreased. Huge shocker there. The Fed finds that 76% of the growth in corporate profits earned by domestic non-financial industries was driven by increase in the dividends rewarding shareholders, and just 15% of the excess cash was devoted to investing in longer-term investment projects. In 2024, corporations paid a record $1.75 trillion in dividends, including $651 billion from U.S.-based companies. Dividend payments more than doubled in the last 16 years, prompted by the 2003 George Bush tax cuts on dividends, which mostly rewarded super-rich shareholders rather than encouraging companies to reinvest. A recent example: Stellantis laid off 900 auto workers, then announced $2.2 billion in a dividend payout. Video game companies. Video game companies do this too. There's this thing that frequently happens where a video game company, as soon as a game is released, will lay off like 2/3 of their staff. And then they'll say, oh, we made this much of profit. And it's profit that they made by ensuring that wages stay suppressed. That's another thing that isn't explicitly stated in the article, right? They're keeping wages suppressed by constantly firing and rehiring people. Like, if you stay on for a year, or even like a few months, you can be entitled to a raise. Sometimes a small raise, right? Like a quarter or 25 cents, 10 cents an hour, just enough to keep up with inflation. But if you're fired at the end of that quarter and rehired, you aren't eligible for that raise. This was a very short article. And the gist of it is that corpo scumbags are paying themselves instead of paying the people who do the actual work. And that's going to come back to bite them in the ass because, like, the less money is in the actual population, the less money there is in the actual population, the less money you can take out of the actual population. At some point, and it sort of feels like we've reached that point and are dealing with the consequences of it. At some point, you're going to reach a point where you can't get any more water out of that stone. And when that happens, the economy collapses. You know what? I wanted to look at this one. We'll look at this one. We have a little bit over half an hour. And this is an article from The Lever. The Lever is dedicated to holding... well, it says right here, hold them accountable. The Lever is a nonpartisan, reader-supported investigative news outlet that holds accountable the people and corporations manipulating the levers of power. The organization was founded in 2020 by David Sciorra, an award-winning journalist and Oscar-nominated writer who has served as the presidential campaign speechwriter for Bernie Sanders. Their whole thing is going after corpo scumfucks and government scumfucks. I think they're most famous. Them and ProPublica got together to do the reporting on the Supreme Court Justice. What was his name? The one that was taking all of those bribes. You might remember that story from a while back. What the fuck is this? Not important. This is one of the outlets I always recommend to people when I have the chance. So I'm going to... paste this in the the chat. It's called a chat. And we're going to go over this real quick. We have about 15 minutes, 20 minutes until I need to stop streaming. I think 3 hours is a good length. The article is titled, "Is the GOP's Tax Revolt Collapsing?" The anti-tax movement has dominated American politics for 50 years, but it may finally be fraying. It says also that this is a companion piece to Lever Time's new audio miniseries, Tax Revolt. Listen and subscribe now. That they call their thing Lever Time, and I call this Ron Time, is a coincidence. I swear. It opens with a quote. "I am a gay woman who is moderately pro-choice. I know that there are some people in this room who don't believe that my marriage should have been legal," the right-wing impersonator Barry Weiss told a Federalist Society gathering in 2023. "And that's okay. because we're all Americans who want lower taxes. The assembled conservatives guffawed at hearing the quiet part out loud. In this case, the admission that tax cuts for the rich have been the glue holding the American right together. And yet, less than 2 years after Weiss's speech, the epoxy seems to be less sticky. Great writing. Just excellent writing. That's such an evocative sentiment. I'm jealous of that. I've been writing every day of my life since I was old enough to hold a pencil. Literally, I have journals from when I was 3 years old in the room in the back over there. And I'm jealous of this. In recent weeks, polls have shown Republican voters becoming far more skeptical of cutting taxes for the rich. Reflecting that shift, GOP lawmakers are now trial ballooning proposals to increase some levies on the wealthy. Some MAGA voices are attempting to articulate a Republican-leaning tax cut version of Democrats' traditional redistributionist rhetoric, arguing that higher taxes on millionaires should finance bigger tax cuts for the working class. All of this has the Washington swamp's old guard Republicans in a panic. One longtime anti-tax leader insisted that there are traitors inside the Trump White House, and another declared that this is a potential crisis in the party. It sounds like Bernie Sanders economics. So what happened? Why is the anti-tax movement losing some of its unifying power among conservatives? Because the anti-tax thing is a mostly liberal idea. That liberal in the sense that it is neoliberal globalist capitalist. The idea of reducing taxes is that the idea of reducing taxes and regulations is that you're freeing up corporations to do things, to innovate. And over the last 30 years, that's what's been done, and it has had the exact opposite effect. There's a brief period in the 80s and the 90s, early 2000s, where you saw a lot of innovation. You saw, at least ostensibly, you saw a lot of innovation. But, the ordinary person saw a lot of innovation. They saw computers, they saw things like the iPod and the iPhone. They saw new kinds of internet and new ways to buy things. But for people my age, the primary thing that happened is that rich people got richer and everyone else got poorer. What is happening is that those anti-tax policies have demonstrated themselves not to work. And people are pushing against them because the economy is dying. That would be what I would say. The idea is in decline because the ideology that championed it has demonstrated itself to not work. Let's see what the lover says. In the mid-1970s, the GOP was adrift, demoralized, and divided amid both the post-Watergate backlash and the Republican President Gerald Ford's attempt to raise taxes in pursuit of halting inflation and plugging federal budget holes. A young journalist named Jude Wanniski had an epiphany when at lunch meeting he watched the economist Arthur Laffer draw a curve on a napkin to argue to Ford staffers Dick Cheney and Dom Rumsfeld that cutting taxes could raise government revenues. They still have that napkin, by the way. Fucking Dick Cheney. He's on my list. 2 years later, Wanniski penned a grand unifying Santa Claus theory, arguing that Republicans had continued to play Scrooge by focusing narrowly on budget austerity and unpopular spending cuts, without offering voters the gift of tax cuts. He concluded Republicans, traditionally the party of income growth, should be the Santa Claus of tax reduction. And he said that they should remember that the first rule of successful politics is never shoot Santa Claus. It was a revelation for a new generation of conservatives seeking to create a sunnier, more optimistic image for the GOP in the wake of the Republican Senator Barry Goldwater's cranky presidential campaign and President Richard Nixon's downfall. Younger, more telegenic Republican leaders, such as then-Representative Jack Kemp, passed the essay around to colleagues, urging them to reimagine tax cuts not solely as a means to demonize government, but also as a way to court the working class with promises of life-bettering benefits. The dual message of so-called supply-side economics soon found its Santa Claus and its anti-tax governor turned anti-tax president, Ronald Reagan. Or as he's called in my circles, Gorback the Devourer. As government's hunger for even more revenues expand, families saw taxes cut deeper and deeper into their paychecks. Gorback said before signing federal legislation to cut the top marginal rate, "That's not even how that works." Scumfuck. Okay. I'm going to finish this paragraph, and we're going to talk about tax rates for a minute. This tax bill is less a reform than a revolution. Millions of working poor will be dropped from the tax rolls altogether, and families will get a long overdue break with lower rates. Okay, so tax brackets. You have different people who live within different means, right? If you're taxing someone who literally can't afford a house, who literally can't afford to eat every day, the same as you're taxing Elon Musk, then you're doing the thing wrong. So what happens is you have tax brackets. People who don't make an income are, for example, within a tax bracket where they don't have to pay taxes. They still do pay taxes. Everyone pays taxes. If you look, well, not everyone. There are a handful of... Okay. Do I have a receipt? I don't. Okay, so if you live here in Illinois, and you go out and you buy some groceries, you look at your receipt. You paid taxes on those groceries. That is effectively a tax on your income. And that goes to pay for certain things, right? So, like, you can be in a tax bracket where you don't pay income, where you don't pay taxes, but you're still paying taxes. And that's fine. That's fine. That works. I'm not even necessarily opposed to things like sin taxes. That's taxes on stuff like cigarettes and liquor and, in some extreme cases, like soda. I would pay $2... I love soda. I would pay $2 more for a case of soda if I knew that, like, the money from that was going to ensuring that children don't go hungry. But, like, I can see it in my head, and I'm trying to explain what I'm seeing. You have people who make different amounts of money. A person who makes $5,000 a year has vastly different needs and lives a vastly different lifestyle than someone who makes $50,000 a year. Lives a vastly different lifestyle and has vastly different needs than someone who makes $500,000 a year. Someone who makes $5,000 a year makes about $500 every month. Less than that, actually. More like $850 a month. Rent in most places is $850 a month. So you can make some assumptions about that person based on their income and the place that they live. Someone who makes $50,000 a month could pay rent, but it would be difficult for them. Someone who makes $5,000 a month, depending on where they live, they're $500,000 a year. Depending on where they live, like someone in Springfield who makes $500,000 a year, if they're any good at money management, they're set. If I made $500,000 a year, I would be giving half of that money away in charity. Because I know how to use money and I know how to live within my means. Now, if you're in New York City or LA or San Francisco or Hollywood or Dallas or Salt Lake City, that's a different story entirely. Vegas is another example. There are places in those places. There are residencies in those places that cost $1,000 a day to live in. So if you have if you're making $500,000 a day, and you're living in a place that costs $1,000 a day to live in, it's going to be a bit more difficult. I should do a video about this. This tangent is too long. I should make a video about this. Let's go back to the article. High income tax cuts became the Republican Party's economic policy priority, and depicting such gifts to the wealthy... My mouth is so dry. Let's try that again. High-income tax cuts became the Republican Party's economic policy priority, and depicting such gifts to the wealthy as a boon to the working class became the GOP's political strategy. Indeed, Reagan, George Bush, and Donald Trump each championed tax cuts legislation that delivered disproportionate benefits to the rich and fueled an explosion of economic inequality, all while presenting their agenda as a fight for the little guy populism. Gonna blow my nose again. I'm not sick. It's just allergies. Everyone in my family has sinus problems. Incidentally, everyone in my family has lived through something that would have killed them. So, if living to be 100 means I have to live with sinus problems until I'm 100, I can live with that. Going back to the article. I promised we would pass a massive tax cut for the everyday working American families who are the backbone and the heartbeat of our country, Trump said on the eve of signing his $1.9 trillion tax cut bill in 2017. We're just days away from keeping that promise and delivering a truly amazing victory for American families. We want to give you, the American people, a giant tax cut for Christmas. Many political prognosticators assumed this now familiar sales pitch would always be effective. But survey data suggests that over the last few decades, most Americans have come to realize that while tax cut Santa Claus has been stashing big gifts under billionaires' Christmas trees, he's been leaving everyone else's stockings empty. Just great writing. A lot of reporting is really dry. This is just fun to read. This is a delight to read. I know I say that there's always more to these things and you should read them yourself, but this is something you should definitely read for yourself. Whereas more than half of Americans approved of Reagan's first major high-income tax proposal, only about a third of Americans approved of Bush's similar tax proposal at the same time in his presidency. By the time Trump assumed office for his first term, less than a third of Americans supported his high-income tax initiative, knowing that such policies have failed to benefit them personally or boost the macroeconomy. The times are totally different, it says. Fast forward to Trump's second term. In previous eras, a new Republican president delivering more tax cuts for the wealthy would be a foregone conclusion under Wasansky's Santa Claus theory. But that political hypothesis is now buckling under the weight of Republicans' new $4.5 trillion proposal to extend Trump's 2017 tax cuts. In its current form, the GOP initiative would deliver more than half of its benefits to the richest 10% of the country. Coupled with spending cuts and tariffs, Trump's agenda would deliver a big income boost to the top 1%, while reducing the income of the bottom 80%, according to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. As Trump's legislative agenda hits Congress, opposition to the more high-income tax cuts is strong not just among Democrats and independents, but also among Republicans. Morning Consult reports that 70% of GOP voters believe the wealthy Americans should pay higher taxes, a whopping 8-point jump from 6 years ago. Moreover, roughly 7 in 10 voters, including 2 in 3 Republicans, support proposals to raise taxes on earners making more than $40,000. Republican leaders are responding to the backlash with the previously unthinkable proposals to raise some taxes on the rich. Trump reportedly floated the idea, and some GOP lawmakers are considering creating a new top tax bracket. This has touched off an intra-party civil war. On one side are those who came of age in the Reagan and George W. Bush epochs. Senator Newt Gingrich, Sean Hannity. Newt Gingrich is a scumfuck, by the way. Newt Gingrich, if you didn't know. I'll finish this paragraph and talk about him. Senator Newt Gingrich, Sean Hannity, former Vice President Mike Pence, Americans for Reform's Grover Nyquist, hedge funder turned GOP Senator Dave McCormick, and the Club for Growth's Stephen Moore. This old guard believes that Republicans can still get away with depicting billionaire giveaways as populism and vilifying tax hikes on the rich. Fucking Newt Gingrich. Fucking Newt Gingrich. I need to talk about Newt Gingrich for a minute. You know what? I think we're going to go until about 12:30. I think I'm feeling mostly alright, and I want to finish this story, so we're gonna stream until about 12:30. So, Newt Gingrich. For those who didn't know, Newt Gingrich is the guy who got Bill Clinton impeached. Unsuccessfully impeached. Like, they charged him with... The general story is that they charged him with lying to Congress, and that kind of fizzled out. What a lot of people don't know is that lying to Congress is the thing they charged him with after years and years and years of searching for anything to charge him with to get him the fuck out of office. Okay, no, there's a comparison I can make here. Benghazi. I don't know how many people watching this would remember Benghazi. Do you remember? But Benghazi was an effort to oust Hillary Clinton from... They spent years and years and years. They spent almost a decade investigating and investigating again and investigating again these claims about Hillary Clinton that ranged from inconsequential to bafflingly non sequitur, to being baffling non sequiturs. And in the end, it just fizzled out. Because there was nothing there. The same thing happened to Bill Clinton when he was president. The Republican Party hates the Clintons. The Republican Party, especially the old guard Republican Party, hates the Clintons because they're more alike than they are different. And that's like the other thing. Bill Clinton was closer to a Republican in terms of like consequential policy making than either of them would like to admit. Hillary Clinton would have been more of the same. The new Democrats, the Clinton Democrats, suck. By the way, the scummy thing about Newt Gingrich, right? Before Mitch McConnell was shutting down the federal government, Newt Gingrich shut down the federal government in order to facilitate the impeachment of Bill Clinton. Like, that was his baby. or at least one of his babies, he was cheating on his wife while he was doing all of this. And I wouldn't normally bring something like that up. I don't think that infidelity is necessarily something to be mocked and ridiculed, both because it's low-hanging fruit and because you don't know what people's private lives are like. A lot of people have unfulfilling personal relationships, and I don't think that a person should necessarily be villainized for, if their relationships are unfulfilling, going outside of that relationship to find fulfillment. I think it's sort of scummy to just reflexively have contempt for someone for doing that. But impeaching someone for doing the same thing that you're doing every day, not just speaking out against someone, but literally having them charged with crimes that could remove them from office. Scumfuck behavior. Scumfuck behavior. Alright, let's go back to the article. It's vicious and full of envy. It's a dumb idea. It's bad for the economy, said Norquist. That is Norquist. I don't remember who he is. Who spent the last quarter century pressing Republicans to sign pledges to oppose all tax increases. What happened when George Herbert Walker Bush raised the top rate? Let's see. He lost the next election. We lost the House and Senate, and taxes went up, and we had a recession. On the other side are newfangled MAGA voices, the former Mitt Romney staffer Orrin Crass, Vice President J.D. Vance, the former Trump strategist Steve Bannon, and reportedly Trump's budget director Russell Vought. They sense political peril in Republicans presenting themselves as populists while their party enriches billionaires and corporations. We have to increase taxes on the wealthy, Bannon said in December. This month, he said conservatives must prove Republicans are not the country club Republicans, which is why it's so important not to extend the tax cuts for the wealthy and actually do more tax cuts for working class people. Of the old anti-tax crowd, Bannon added, they're arrogant and refuse to look at the reality of the situation we're in. The times are totally different. Fuck all of those people, by the way. Steve Bannon is genuinely one of the most dangerous people in the country, in the world, because he's more or less an open fascist, but he has the rare distinction of being mildly competent. Like, his observations are correct. There needs to be... He's observing correctly that not only is the economy in shambles, but it's in shambles due to decades of Republican mismanagement, and the only way to fix that is to do the thing. But he's not doing that out of the kindness of his heart. He's not trying to fix things. He's just doing it so that they can do more fascism later. Fuck Bannon, fuck Vance, fuck every one of those fascist sons of bitches. Okay, back to the article. Of course, we've been at these junctures before. Moments when Republicans seemed to sense political vulnerability on taxes. In 1985, Reagan tried to deflect Democrats' criticism of his tax policy by insisting there is one group of losers in our tax plan, those individuals and corporations who are not paying their fair share, or, for that matter, any share. These abuses cannot be tolerated. Similarly, George W. Bush momentarily pushed back against conservative aides pressing him to champion yet another tax cut for the rich. Didn't we already give them a break at the top? He reportedly asked. That does sound like... Oh, no. Yeah, George W. Bush is Baby Bush. That sounds like something he would say, because he's kind of a dope. But the powerful anti-tax movement of those eras convinced both Republican presidents to plow forward. Reagan followed up his first tax cut by further reducing the top tax rate, and Bush's sequel to his first tax cut was slashing taxes on corporate dividends. Trump could end up doing much the same. After all, ramming more tax cuts for the wealthy through Congress is the surest way for the president to enrich himself, his family, and the entire front row of his inauguration. But this time around, the long-term politics of taxes are in flux. Running the same tax play would show a Republican president siding with oligarchs against the preferences of its own party's rank and file that no longer buys the Santa Claus theory. That's the new and unpredictable dynamic, one that may finally begin to weaken the anti-tax movement's grip on power in the years ahead. So, liberalism is failing. The ideology of liberalism is failing. And it's failing so hard that even people in the GOP are like, yeah, no, we got to pull back a bit. There's another aspect to this that's interesting too, because one of the things I've been working on is a response to a document published by Third Way. Third Way are a milquetoast liberal group. They're ostensibly Democrats, but they're the sucky Clinton-style New Democrats. And one of the things that they keep saying is that, oh, you need to focus on the economy. You need to focus on the economy. But when they say that, they don't mean focus on the economy for little people. They mean that they want more tax cuts. More or less. And you can see this in how people who take those ideas very seriously talk about it. I was at a town hall hosted by a woman named Nikki Baczynski, who is, I don't think she's my representative. I think that she is a representative for the district next to me. I'm pretty sure that my representative is the fascist scumfuck, openly fascist, white supremacist scumfuck Mary Miller. But Nikki Baczynski is, like, pretty scummy herself. Like, I've heard it said that the only reason the Democrats are willing to tolerate her is because she's so good at fundraising. Which, she gets her fundraising from fucking AIPAC and J Street, so that's almost cheating. But during her town hall, she talked about, like, needing to, like, cut taxes on certain kinds of people. And she used the same kind of rhetoric that Ronald Reagan would use. Oh, we need to cut taxes for the little guy. We need to make sure that economic prosperity for everyone does the thing. And that's, like, straight out of the Third Way document, right? One of the things that they repeatedly emphasize is that people don't want to talk about identity politics. They want to talk about fucking economics. And there's truth to that, in as much as, like, people are more concerned about putting food on their table than they are about microaggressions. And that's something that remains true regardless of who you're talking to. Like, I'm going to make a presumption here that may be offensive. There is a professor here in Springfield, Dr. Lisa Johnson, who studies the sort of disparities that I'm talking about. She tried one time to speak before city council. They threatened to arrest her. Scumfuck behavior on the city council's end. But I am very certain, because Dr. Johnson is a very reasonable person. I've spoken to her several times. I'm very certain that if it came down to, like, microaggressions or putting food on someone's plate. You know what? No, I'm not going to put words in someone's mouth. That would also be scumfuck behavior. People's economic concerns aren't about the economy. People's economic concerns are about their own finances and the finances of people they care about. Trying to frame things, and it's not just that either, but, like, trying to frame things as being good or bad for the economy is a non-starter because people don't give a fuck about the economy. And moreover, people my age have been able to observe that gains in the economy have been detrimental to them. Like, rescuing the stock market. Bush and Obama rescuing the stock market in 2009 and 2010 led to all kinds of people losing their jobs and corpo scum fucks pocketing all of the money that they saved. The PPP loans are another good example. The guy who came before Mary Miller, another scum fuck named Rodney Davis, he's dead, by the way. Rodney Davis more or less sold PPP loans. He exchanged PPP loans, and he gave out PPP loans in exchange for campaign donations, and in some instances refused to give PPP loans to people who did not give him campaign donations. That's actually one of the reasons that he ended up losing to Mary Miller. Although I'm fairly certain, based on things that I've heard, that it isn't the reason that he jumped off the window. People are correctly understanding that the economy doesn't work for them. And moreover, that the government doesn't work for them. The thing that a lot of people haven't quite put together explicitly, but kind of understand intrinsically, emotionally, is that the economy and the government are working in tandem. What is good for the economy is ostensibly good for the government, in as much as, like, more money, more money. But the thing that people aren't quite grasping is that money is coming from them. It's coming from their labor. It's coming from their plate. Like, literally, the food that they put on their table. And I feel like part of the reason that this pushback is happening, especially among the fascists, is because they, quite rightly, want to avoid people making that connection by any means necessary. When you realize that the problem, like, so much stuff that the government does is revolved around not letting people see that the problem is capitalism. When people realize that capitalism is the problem, there will be a revolt. And a lot of people, COVID especially, was a major awakening in whether or not in how people saw capitalism conceptually as being the enemy. Which I think is also a part of why there was so much. And that's part of the reason that QAnon happened the way it did, is a lot of that was pushback from capitalists. Saying, no, it's not capitalism that's a problem. It's China that's the problem. It's unpaid DNC staffers that's the problem. It's the Jews that are the problem. And it's fucking ridiculous. None of those things are... It's just capitalism. It's just capitalism. And we can all get together and fix that. But we need to just decide to do it. Alright. I made that speech to no one. Future viewers, maybe. Let me get my outro up. Do I have an outro? I don't. So I'll make one up. That is Ron time for today. If you want me to review a specific article from somewhere, if you want me to look over a specific story, you can leave it in the comments of this video. You can send it to me on Blue Sky. I still check that periodically. I think I have it set up to where you can make community posts. I'm not going to make a Ko-Fi pitch to an empty room. That would be absurd. But my Ko-Fi link is still in the description if you're watching this after it airs and would like to contribute a couple of bucks. I would really appreciate that. So the next stream is not going to be tomorrow. Tomorrow's City Hall, and that City Hall is going to go long. It's not. It's also not going to be Wednesday because Wednesday is my DSA meeting, and attending the DSA meeting does not give me enough prep time to do a stream. So Thursday is going to be the next stream. Probably. We'll just go over more journalism articles. I don't know. I specifically had a handful of people ask me to keep doing this. Like, there were maybe 30 people overall who watched this, and about half of the people who watched it reached out to me and said, hey, this is useful, I want you to keep doing this. And that is encouraging. That's encouraging. And I appreciate that. So, yeah. I guess I'm all said out. That's everything I have to say. Until next time. Until Thursday night at 10. Go out, do something important, and take care of yourselves. Speaking of which, as soon as this stream is over... no one's watching. As soon as you're done watching this, go get something to drink, go stretch, take your meds.